This is Jenny, and this is part 2 of my gel plate printing mixed media art journal page. If you missed part 1, check it out. So here we are at part 2 of this video series on how to make an art journal page with your Gelli plate. These die cuts right here are the ones that I use to add the texture to the background of my Gelli print. And I am painting them with the same paints, the distress paints that I used on my Gelli print background. I have taken the mowed lawn and I am painting it over with a brush. And once I get them all painted with a brush, I decide to go back in with my Gelli plate and add some other paint colors onto the Gelli plate with a brayer and kind of roll these branches around in those other paint colors because it started getting a little bit too flat. After all of that playing around with the Gelli plate and all of the textures and the visual interest I got from the layers of paint, I didn't want these embellishments that I'm using on my art journal page to then be flat. So I took a little bit of the broken china and I intended to get a little bit of the old olive, but it came out a little faster and it's darker, so it was a little bit more intense than I had planned. And I also pulled out, I can't remember if it's picket fence or antique linen, one of those whites, and kind of mix that together with the brayer. And once I had that mixed up, I added a little bit of the broken china distress paint to the top of that. So once I get that kind of mushed together, I don't want to blend it to make a new color. I want to mix it to have a multitude of colors. I will then go ahead and put these branches, the branch die cuts, into this splat of paint on my Gelli plate and go over it with that brayer. Now the paper I'm using is one of the prints I got in the first video in this series when I was doing the Gelli printing. So there are the branches, and they're mostly green, but they do have some blue and some white, and that just gives it a visual interest. It adds some highlight, it adds some low lights, and it just makes them look less flat. And then I will pull another one of the prints and lay it down here and try and pick up the rest of that ink. Now I talked a little bit in the first video about how the mixed media paper doesn't necessarily pick up all of the ink, and I'm not sure exactly why that is. But the next piece of paper is just, this piece of paper here is just copy paper, regular 20-pound cheapo copy paper from Walmart. And it picks up almost all of the ink on that Gelli plate. When I use copy paper for my Gelli printing, I don't have to use baby wipes hardly at all to get it clean. The next thing I want to do is take this dress form die cut and add some black soot distress paint to my Gelli plate. I want this dress form to be mostly black. I don't want it to look green and yellow and white like it does now. It will not be perfect. It will have some of the other paint colors on it still, but it is mostly black, and that's what I wanted. I wanted it to have that dress form look, right? And then I'm going to go ahead and clean up all of this black paint off the Gelli plate. And then and you can see from just looking that the copy paper picks up most of the paint. So now that I've got my Gelli plate cleaned off, I used a little bit of a baby wipe at the end there. I'm going to go ahead and pull in this print. So this print here is the one that I decided I was going to use. I think I ended up with 5 or 6 prints, and this is the one I decided I wanted to use. And I am adding a layer of clear gesso over the top of it. The acrylic paints are not typically water reactive. But I generally put a layer of gesso or Mod Podge in between layers so that there's not a reaction between the layers of ink and stuff that I add that I don't want. This is a piece of mesh fabric. It's kind of the texture of that gauzy bandage stuff. I don't know where I got it. It was in my mixed media drawer, my bin of supplies. But I've gone ahead and sprayed it with a Delusion spray ink in kind of a turquoise blue. And now my fingers are completely blue. And that stuff does not come off for a hot minute, let me tell you. So for the next element on this art journal page, I have decided to use this dictionary paper. Now it didn't need to be dictionary paper. I just needed some scrap paper. And I am taking these distress paints and painting over it. The words on the text don't necessarily disappear, but I wasn't worried about whether they disappeared or were still visible. That was not a concern necessarily. I just needed some scrap paper and that was there. So I am again using Old Olive and Mowed Lawn. I will also use the same two yellows, Squeezed Lemonade and Mustard Seed. And then I also pulled in Picked Raspberry and Sponge Sugar, I think, for my pinks. Now, these acrylic paints dry really quickly, so by the time I had all the paints down and had the lids put back on and the brush cleaned out, it didn't really take much drying time. I didn't have to spend too much time drying it with my heat tool. But yeah, anyway, sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a minute. So yeah, I've got those paints down and I'm going to punch this paper with two Stampin' Up! Punches. Flower punches. I don't know what they're called. I could look it up, but I don't even think I have a current catalog. They're punches I've had for a while, and they're both 5 flower punches. One is a large flower, one is a small flower. And I am going to use the small flower on the yellow and pink papers, and I am going to use the large flower on the green side, except I'm going to turn that large flower into leaves. Now, I punched out 5 or 6 of each color flower. I wasn't sure how many I was going to need. I decided to use like 3 at the, that's what I put on my desk to use, and then I pushed the rest off to the side and figured if I needed another one, it would be there. I am going to ink up the edges with some Distress Oxide ink. This is Gathered Twig. And to make those green flowers into leaves, I just cut each of the 5 petal flower down into a 2-leaf section. And I put 2 leaves on each flower that I used. And I just inked up the edges to kind of hide that paper, the raw paper look. I don't really want that raw paper showing up on the page. It's not one of the looks I was going for on this page. So I just went ahead and inked up all those flowers and the leaves with the Distress Oxide Gathered Twigs. There we go. I got it out. Gathered Twigs Distress Oxide ink. Wow. The flowers are kind of small and they're going to fit just kind of perfect on this art journal page. So there we go. Here is my art journal page, and I've decided to take the ink that's left in that ink blending foam and just go ahead and go around the edges. It's not super dark. It just adds a little bit of a frame or a border, and it kind of creates the illusion of, hey, look here, and it pulls your eye to the middle of the page. Okay, so the first part of that was all double speed. I can't remember if I told you that or not. And now we're into real time. This is me fidgeting with all of the elements of this page in real time speed. When I pulled the prints from the Gelli plate, it is, okay, so when I was looking at my Gelli plate, I had my leaves going from the top left to the bottom right. But when you pull that print, it's a mirror image. And I hadn't thought about that, but when I was planning this out, because again, this all was kind of an experiment, but it turned out okay. I like how the leaves go one direction on the page and the shadow of the leaves goes the other direction. One thing I am going to do to make sure that the leaves don't just completely blend into the background here is take this dictionary page. And that's why I had the page on my desk. I wanted some text behind these leaves, and I could have used a text stamp. I could have just done some scribbling on it with a pen, but I have this dictionary and it works. And it was just another layer. It adds a little bit more texture. So now I have to lay this on here and figure out how I want it all to go. Because in my brain, I have this image, but my brain is bigger than that piece of paper, right? I mean, the image I'm seeing in my brain doesn't have the edges of the page. So I have to figure out where to lay this all down so that all of the elements will fit onto the page and that they will all look independent and cohesive at the same time. Now, I don't want anything out in left field just hanging there. I want it to be tied to the page, but I don't want all of the elements of the page to just blend together into nothingness. So here I've gone ahead and I also inked around the edges of this dictionary paper so that those edges would be a little bit, they would tie into the page itself and the flowers, and it gives it kind of an edge there, a definition of border. So I've got one little piece going horizontal and one piece going vertical, just kind of keeping in line with how that text paper tore. I didn't pay any attention to it. I just tore it into the size strip I thought I would need for the page. And I am attaching these leaves with just a regular school glue stick. I have not used glue stick on a lot of art journal pages. It's just something I started doing recently. So we will see how well that holds up long term. Worst case scenario is I can go back in later and add some matte medium or some Mod Podge, or heck, even my glue gun if I need to make it all stick down. So I have these two larger branches and they are going opposite. They are laying on this Gelli print the same way I laid them on the Gelli plate when I was pulling the prints. They are going from the top left to the bottom right. And this, I'm just laying this dress form on here to make sure things are going kind of where I want them to go, right? I've got these other two branches of leaves to put on, and I decided I needed another piece of dictionary text so that they would, again, not blend into the background. And I had already glued down those first two branches. And I didn't, I started picking at it a little bit to see if I could get it to slide underneath there, but I didn't want to pick at it too much. I didn't want to rip it. And part of that's going to be covered up anyway with this other branch, so it didn't really matter. Again, this is how my brain is processing this project. I had, like I said in the other video, I had an idea, an image of how I wanted this to go, but it wasn't something I had done before. Like, I haven't used my Gelli plate in a long time before this project, and I hadn't done it with an intentional look, wanting to get an intentional look. So my brain has got this idea, and I've got to make that translate onto the page. And so far, it's working out. Thank goodness, right? Because there's nothing worse than getting into the middle of a project and going, I don't know how to make this work. Okay, so now we have this mesh that has been sprayed with the ink, and I don't want it to be flat, and it is a little bit bigger than I want it to be. So I am going to go ahead and cut that mesh in half. Now, and I tried to tear it, but it didn't tear. It was going the wrong direction. So I just grabbed my scissors and snipped it in half. And I took one piece and I kind of scrunched it up and stuck it on the page there. And I want it to poke out from behind that dress form die cut, but I don't want it to take over the whole front of the page. And now I got to figure out how to attach it. So, okay, I am going to go back with the glue stick and put a lot of it on there. And then I'm going to lay this mesh down and I'm going to smash it down with my fingertips and kind of scrunch it in from the sides. And then there's a fuzzy piece on top that starts driving me crazy. So I'm going to cut that off from when I tried to tear it in half instead of cut it. And it's just all a lot of fidgeting. The thing I like about art journal pages is that there's so many ways you can approach art journal. You can go into it with a very specific idea of things to use, like with mission inspiration. You can go into it with just a color palette. You can go into it with a quote or a thought or an idea. And then you just have to go with it from there. So now that I have the mesh on this page, I have to figure out how to get the dress form onto the page. And I am going to take this foam tape and I am going to cut little teeny tiny skinny pieces of foam tape to go on that dress form. I will not make you watch that. I will edit that out because it is terrifying to watch. Once I get the foam tape on the back of this dress form, I am also going to add some liquid glue. Now I'm adding the glue because it does not grab hold instantly. So when I put this dress form down on my page, I will have a minute to kind of futz with it and fidget with it and figure out exactly where I want it to go without tearing anything because the foam tape stuck. Okay, so there we go. We got the mesh on, we got the dress form on, and now we are adding the dress. I am going to use that school glue again, mostly because it doesn't make my fingers as messy as the liquid glue does. I'm a little bit nervous. I do think the liquid glue probably would have held better, but it makes my fingers so messy and they're already all covered in paint and oy. Anyway, we have the dress on the dress form and it's looking just like I wanted it to look. So now I have these flower die cuts that I made out of the dictionary page and I need to glue the flowers to the leaves. So we're just going to go with that glue stick again. It should have no problem sticking that paper together because that's literally what it's made for, sticking the paper to the paper. The flowers do look a little bit flat, and so there is some fidgeting I'm going to have to do with the flowers. And I did end up later pulling out some of my sticky back, flat back pearl embellishments to stick in the middle of the flowers to kind of give them a little bit more oomph, dimension. I don't know what the right word is. So I'm realizing that these are super flat and I'm not loving it. So I'm trying to figure out how I can make them look less flat. But I've already glued them down. So what I ended up doing off camera is taking these little flowers and putting them on the back of my mouse pad and running the end of a paintbrush right in the middle to kind of curl up the petals a little bit. And I'm just trying to stick these down in a way that they won't completely disappear and completely flatten. And where do I want them? I know I want them on there kind of at the hip of the dress and at the place where the leaf branches all seem to be meeting together. I don't want the yellow flower right on top of the yellow dress, so probably I should have used a different color, but why introduce another color at this time? Yes, these are all of the tabs that are open in my brain while I'm working on this page. So I decided I didn't like them just flat. They were too flat. So I brought in some of the other die cuts that I had punched out. And I have done the same thing to them that I did with the first ones. And I will show you here how that's done. I pulled out my mouse pad and this time I used a stylus, I think. Oh, nope, I did. I grabbed my paintbrush handle and just rolled it around in the middle. And this time I used a smaller brush. So it really curled those petals up tight. And I've even got some white circles there that I thought maybe I could add to the middle, but they ended up being just a little bit too big, which is what led me to think about the pearls, which I cannot honestly remember if I did on camera or not. So that's going to be a surprise for both of us. All right, so we're just going to edge up these pink and yellow flowers again. And you can see there's already some glue, little dots of glue right there in those flowers already. And I'm going to kind of offset these because it's a 5-petal flower. I can turn it just a bit. And now it's going to look like a 10-petal flower. And that extra layer of flowers is the perfect amount of dimension for this page. It's just right. It was looking a little bit too flat before, and when I got done, I just thought it was exactly what I had in mind when I started this page. And I'm using a cuticle stick because that's what was laying on my desk to kind of push those flowers down onto that little dot of glue to make them, till the glue sticks, right? And I've got my jewel picker there, and I actually, instead of the pearls, that's why I couldn't remember if it was in the page or not. I changed my mind from the pearls, and I have these aqua blue sequins. They're kind of the same color of blue that I sprayed on the fabric, and the same colors of blue that I used on the Gelli print page, the background. So I'm just pulling these out. I have no idea where I got these sequins. If I had to guess, I would say Ellen Hudson or Simon Says Stamp. But they've been in my stash for a hot minute, so who knows? And I am using the lightest color blue in this stash, or in this set of sequins. So here's my page, and you can see there is a blank space on the bottom. And I did find a quote in my quote board, Pinterest board, and it's from Shakespeare. It says, "Though she be but little, she is fierce." And I thought it kind of fit perfectly with this very sweet dress. And I have printed it on some clear sticker paper that just goes through my laser printer. I found it on Amazon, I think, and it's perfect. I just stick it through the paper feed for cardstock, and it just goes right through. The toner works on it perfectly. I have not had a problem with it yet. I've even used it through my Cricut machine, and that worked out pretty well too. So it's really cool stuff. Anyway, clear sticker paper. I have printed this quote, "Though she be but little, she be fierce," from Shakespeare. And I am going to add it to that bottom corner down there. And like I said, I didn't have a quote in mind. And you can see from the video footage that the lighting is different. It's a different, I think I did this the next day after things started to dry a bit. And I just cut that out and put it right there on the bottom. And I think the page is done. All that's left is my signature and the date. And I will do that right now in the corner with my Sharpie pen. And there it is. So this is the image I had in my head when I was dreaming or thinking of art journaling. So do me a favor, give me a thumbs up, share my page, like my page, and let me know what you think. Thanks so much for stopping by. Have a great night.